You know, if you've ever taken the train between Edinburgh and Glasgow, you've probably flown right past this absolutely majestic ruin. It's a place where kings were born, a legendary queen took her very first breath, and the story of a royal dynasty is literally etched in stone. So today, let's explore the incredible story behind these magnificent walls.
And that's a really good question, isn't it? This isn't just another drafty old castle. This was a luxurious royal retreat, a favorite home of Scottish monarchs for centuries. So, how did it become this spectacular, overlooked landmark? Well, in this explainer, we're going to find out. We're about to take a little trip back in time, peeling back the layers of this incredible place. We'll walk the same halls as the Stuart kings, stand in the very rooms where history was made, and find out exactly how this grand palace became the breathtaking ruin we see today. Okay, so to really get a handle on Linlithgow, you have to understand one thing right off the bat. This was not built to be a fortress. Its main purpose was comfort, luxury, and leisure. This was the Stewart Dynasty's pleasure palace.
And you know, the name itself is a pretty big clue. Linlithgow actually translates to the lake in the moist hollow. It's a name that just conjures up this image of peace and natural beauty, which perfectly describes its setting right next to the serene Linlithgow Loch. The location was chosen for tranquility, not just for tactical advantage. And this is what really sets it apart. Think about other famous Scottish castles like Stirling or Edinburgh. They're all about defense, cold stone and high walls. Linlithgow was designed to be the opposite. It was a lavish, welcoming home, a place for huge royal parties and the sophisticated life of the court. It wasn't just about defense. It was a huge statement piece, showing the rest of Europe that the Scottish crown was just as cultured and magnificent as any other.
Now, the palace you see today, well, it didn't just pop up overnight. It was really the passion project of a whole series of ambitious Stuart kings, with each one leaving their own personal stamp on its design over almost 200 years.
So, it all kicks off back in 1424, when a massive fire rips through the town and destroys the old royal manor. King James I sees his chance and starts building something far, far grander. His successors, James IV and V, they keep the project going, adding the final wings and really lavish details, like that glorious fountain. And get this, even after the court moved to London, James VI poured a ton of money into rebuilding the North Range after it dramatically collapsed. That just shows you how important this palace still was to them. All right, let's imagine we're stepping through the main gate right into the courtyard. This was the vibrant, beating heart of the palace. And it's here you can really feel the vision of King James V, who desperately wanted to create a home that could rival the great Renaissance courts of Europe. And the absolute centerpiece of that vision was this magnificent, three-tiered courtyard fountain. I mean, for its time, this was an incredibly elaborate and expensive piece of stonework. It became legendary. So much so that years later, in 1745, when Bonnie Prince Charlie visited, it's said they actually made the fountain flow with wine to celebrate his arrival. Can you just imagine that spectacle?
And exploring the rest of the palace, you really get a sense of what daily life was like. The Great Hall, started by James I, was this enormous, cavernous space for huge state banquets and even meetings of Parliament. Then you had the Royal Chapel, and we know from records it got a brand new organ way back in 1513. And of course, the real engine room of the palace, the kitchens and the brew house. The fireplace in the lower kitchen is so massive you could probably park a small car in it. They brewed unbelievable amounts of wheat ale here. That was the daily drink for absolutely everyone, from the king right down to the lowest servant. But you know, beyond all the grand architecture and stone, Linlithgow was a home. It was a place of birth and love and loss for the Stewart Dynasty, and its story is deeply tied to some of Scotland's most famous royals. Back in 1503, King James IV gifted the whole palace to his new wife, Margaret Tudor, who was the sister of England's infamous King Henry VIII. It quickly became her absolute favorite home. Their son, the future James V, was born right here in 1512, and this is where one of the palace's most heartbreaking legends comes from. After James IV was killed at the disastrous Battle of Flodden in 1513, it's said that a heartbroken Queen Margaret would climb to the highest turret on the northwest tower to watch for his return, a spot that's now forever known as Queen Margaret's Bower. But the most famous birth to happen within these walls, well, that came almost 30 years later, in the bitter cold of December 1542. Her father, King James V, was dying in another castle. But here at Linlithgow, his daughter Mary was born. This palace was her very first home.
For the first 7 months of her life, she was kept safe in the royal apartments, a newborn queen right in the middle of a massive political storm.
You know, even as an infant, Mary was a huge deal. In March of 1543, the English ambassador, a guy named Ralph Sadler, came to see the baby who was at the center of marriage talks with England's Prince Edward. He wrote back to London that Mary was as goodly a child I have seen and like to live. It's just this wonderfully human glimpse into the very beginning of her dramatic and ultimately tragic life, a life that started right here.
For more than a century, Linlithgow was at the very heart of Scottish royal life. But a single political event was about to change its destiny forever, setting it on a long, slow path to becoming the ruin we see today.
And here's the moment everything changed. The year is 1603, and the Union of the Crowns happens. King James VI of Scotland also becomes King James I of England, and the entire royal court packs its bags and moves south to London. Literally overnight, Linlithgow goes from being a principal royal residence, the center of everything, to, well, a forgotten outpost that was rarely visited and no longer essential.
And the decline was pretty swift. Just 4 years after the court left, the Old North Range, which had been in bad shape for a while, just collapsed in the middle of the night. King Charles I was the last reigning monarch to ever stay here, and that was for just one single night in 1633. But the final, fatal blow came over a century later.
So picture this. It's the winter of 1746, and government troops who are chasing Bonnie Prince Charlie are stationed inside the palace. On a cold February night, they light fires to keep warm, but one of the fires gets out of control in their straw bedding. The blaze just tears through the palace, consuming the entire structure. When the sun came up the next morning, the magnificent pleasure palace was nothing but a blackened, roofless shell. And that's how it's remained ever since.
But the story doesn't end there, with fire and ruin, because in the centuries since, Linlithgow Palace has found a new life and a new purpose, cementing its place not just in Scotland's history, but in its modern culture too.
Today, the palace is looked after by Historic Environment Scotland. It's open to visitors all year round, and you can walk through the very same halls as the Stuart kings and queens. It's just a short train ride from Edinburgh, so it's an incredibly easy piece of history to visit. You can explore the Great Hall, you can climb Queen Margaret's Bower, and you can stand in that courtyard right next to the famous fountain.
And what's really fascinating is how the palace has this whole second life in pop culture. I mean, if you're an Outlander fan, you might recognize its stone corridors as the setting for the grim Wentworth prison. It was also featured in the Netflix movie Outlaw King. The grounds host a huge annual music festival called Party at the Palace. And back in 2012, the fashion house Chanel even used it as a dramatic backdrop for a runway show. So, from a luxurious royal home and the cradle of a queen, to a military barracks, a forgotten ruin, and now a star of the screen and the stage, the palace's story just keeps on shifting and evolving. It's a real testament to its enduring power and its undeniable beauty.
And that really leaves us with one final thought. When you look at these majestic walls, are you seeing an empty, ruined building? Or are you seeing a story? A story of kings and queens, of birth and death, of glory and decline, all of it set in stone, just waiting for the next visitor to come and read its incredible chapters.